On the 13th of October, in the year 1307, at dawn, across every corner of France, thousands of armored soldiers moved in perfect synchronization. They burst through monastery gates, castle doors, and fortress walls with a single mission: arrest every Knight Templar breathing. King Philip IV had signed the order months earlier, but he waited. He waited until the exact moment when the stars aligned with an ancient calculation. What he destroyed that morning was not just an order of warrior monks, it was a prophecy. A timeline that predicted the world would reach a breaking point 719 years later. In the year 2026, the Templars possessed something that terrified every monarch and religious authority in medieval Europe. It was not gold. It was not military power. It was knowledge. Knowledge of cycles, of astronomical patterns, of human consciousness reaching specific thresholds at predetermined moments in history. They had mapped the future with mathematical precision that should not have existed in the 13th century. Their calculations pointed to a convergence point, a moment when humanity would face an existential crossroads. That moment is now, and the evidence they left behind, hidden in coded manuscripts, architectural alignments, and encrypted letters, is screaming at us from 7 centuries of silence. For decades, historians dismissed the fragments as religious mysticism, medieval superstition, astronomical curiosities with no real meaning. But then researchers started noticing something impossible. The dates matched. The planetary alignments the Templars recorded 700 years ago are happening right now, in this exact month, in this exact year. The technological thresholds they predicted, the spiritual awakening they described, the collapse of old power structures they foresaw, all converging simultaneously in 2026. The scholars who discovered these connections faced academic ridicule, career destruction, and in some cases, threats that forced them into silence. Because what they found was not ancient history. It was a blueprint for our present moment. Somewhere in the Vatican archives, beneath 53 kilometers of underground tunnels, documentation exists that proves the Church knew. They knew the prophecy was real. They knew what it predicted. And they made a calculated decision 7 centuries ago to erase it from human consciousness. Every Templar document that mentioned the prophecy was marked for destruction. Every witness who understood its meaning was silenced. Every architectural code that pointed to 2026 was deliberately misinterpreted. The suppression was systematic, brutal, and nearly complete, because a handful of fragments survived. And those fragments tell a story that shatters everything we thought we understood about history, consciousness, and the invisible forces that have shaped human civilization. You are living inside the prophecy right now. The events unfolding around you, the technological acceleration you are witnessing, the spiritual awakening spreading across millions of people, the collapse of institutions that seemed eternal just years ago. None of this is random. The Templars saw it coming. They calculated it with precision that defies rational explanation. And they left behind a warning, a map, a final testament buried in symbols and codes that only make sense when you stand at the exact moment they predicted. That moment is not coming. It is here. And what happens next depends on whether we finally have the courage to see what they tried so desperately to show us. Imagine that right now, at this exact moment, there exists documentation that completely rewrites everything you have been taught about human history. But it is not in the textbooks. It is not displayed in museums. It is hidden, deliberately erased from the official narrative. And here is the worst part. The same institutions that concealed this truth 700 years ago still have the power to ensure you never discover it. They burned the evidence. They murdered the witnesses. They rewrote the history books. And they almost succeeded in making you forget that the Knights Templar possessed a prophecy that predicted the year 2026 with terrifying precision. You have been taught that the Templars were simply warrior monks who protected Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. You have been told they were destroyed because they became too wealthy, too powerful, too threatening to the French crown. The official story claims King Philip IV arrested them on Friday the 13th of October, 1307, because he was deeply in debt to the order and wanted to seize their assets. This is the narrative that every history professor repeats. This is what tells you. This is the lie that has been carefully maintained for 7 centuries, because the real reason the Templars were annihilated has nothing to do with money or political power. It has everything to do with what they knew, what they predicted, what they tried to warn humanity about. In the year 1307, across France, within a single 24-hour period, more than 5,000 Templars were arrested simultaneously. The operation required military precision. Secret orders were distributed weeks in advance, sealed with instructions not to open them until the specified date. Soldiers moved at dawn, hitting every Templar commandery, fortress, and chapel at exactly the same moment. This was not a spontaneous act of royal greed. This was a coordinated suppression campaign designed to capture and destroy specific documents before they could be hidden or dispersed. The interrogation records that survive tell us what the Inquisition wanted. They asked about rituals, about initiation ceremonies, about whether Templars worshipped false idols. But buried in those transcripts are questions about something else. Questions about astronomical charts. Questions about prophecies. Questions about calculations that pointed to a specific date in the distant future. For every page you can read about the Templars in mainstream historical sources, there are 10 pages that were deliberately burned. The Vatican archives contain catalogs of destroyed Templar manuscripts, lists of confiscated documents marked for obliteration, inventory records showing thousands of parchments removed from Templar libraries and never seen again. In the year 1312, 5 years after the mass arrests, Pope Clement V issued a papal bull officially dissolving the order of the Knights Templar. But before that dissolution, during those 5 years, the Church conducted the most systematic destruction of documents in medieval history. They were not just eliminating evidence of heresy or financial corruption. They were erasing a timeline, a calculation, a prophecy that had been passed down through the inner circle of the order for nearly 2 centuries. The Templars were founded in the year 1119, officially to protect Christian pilgrims, but within 9 years, by 1128, they had excavated beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. They spent nearly a decade digging through the ruins of Solomon's Temple. Official histories claim they found treasure. Some legends say they discovered the Ark of the Covenant. But what if they found something far more dangerous than gold or sacred relics? What if they discovered knowledge, documents, calculations, astronomical records left behind by civilizations that understood cycles of human consciousness, cycles of planetary alignment, cycles that repeat across millennia? The Templars brought something back from Jerusalem that changed them fundamentally. Within 20 years of their founding, they had become the most powerful financial institution in Europe. They possessed navigational knowledge that allowed them to establish trade routes others could not replicate. They built cathedrals using mathematical principles that modern architects still struggle to explain. But here is what they never tell you in history class. The Templars maintained a secret inner circle. Not all knights had access to the same knowledge. The majority of the order believed they were serving God and protecting pilgrims. But at the highest levels, among the Grand Masters and their most trusted advisors, there existed a completely different understanding of their mission. They were guardians, not of treasure, not of military power, but of a timeline. A prophecy encoded in astronomical calculations that predicted specific convergence points in human history. Moments when planetary alignments, solar cycles, and collective human consciousness would reach critical thresholds. The prophecy identified several such moments, but one date stood above all others, a date when all the cycles would converge simultaneously, a date when humanity would face an existential choice point. That date was calculated to be 719 years after the Order's destruction, the year 2026. The evidence for this prophecy exists in fragments scattered across the world. In the architecture of Templar churches, where astronomical alignments point to specific dates, encoded letters between Grand Masters that reference celestial events occurring in what they called the Age of Awakening. In manuscripts hidden in Ethiopian monasteries, where Templar refugees fled after 1307, carrying forbidden knowledge across continents. In excavations in Argentine Patagonia, where Templar symbols have been found carved into stone, accompanied by astronomical charts that make no sense unless you understand they were calculating future planetary positions. These fragments have been discovered. Researchers have documented them. But every time someone tries to connect them publicly, to show the complete pattern, they face systematic suppression. You live in a reality where only a fraction of historical truth is visible. The rest was buried, literally buried, in Vatican underground archives, spanning 53 kilometers of tunnels. Burned in the Great Purges of 1307 to 1312. Rewritten by scribes who were ordered to remove specific references from official chronicles. The Church spent centuries ensuring that no coherent record of the Templar prophecy survived. Because if people understood what the Templars predicted, if they saw the calculations with their own eyes, they would ask questions that institutions of power cannot afford to answer. Questions about who really controls the flow of information. Questions about what else has been hidden. Questions about why certain knowledge is considered too dangerous for public consciousness. The suppression continues today. Modern historians who dare to suggest the Templars possessed advanced astronomical knowledge are marginalized as conspiracy theorists. Archaeologists who find Templar artifacts in unexpected locations face funding cuts and academic isolation. Documentary filmmakers who try to present evidence of the prophecy encounter mysterious obstacles in securing broadcast deals. The pattern is clear. 700 years later, the same forces that destroyed the Templars are still working to ensure their prophecy remains hidden. But they are failing, because the year they predicted has arrived. And what the Templars warned about is not theory anymore. It is happening. Right now. In front of your eyes. The convergence they calculated 7 centuries ago is unfolding in real time. And the question is no longer whether the prophecy was real. The question is whether we will finally open our eyes to see what they tried so desperately to show us. In the year 1248, a Templar cartographer named Guillaume de Sonnac completed a map that should not have existed. The map showed the coastline of Antarctica, with remarkable accuracy, centuries before any European vessel would officially discover that frozen continent. The map included details of coastal features, bays, and peninsulas that would not be charted by modern explorers until the 20th century. But here is what makes this impossible. The map showed Antarctica without ice. It depicted the actual landmass beneath the glaciers. The kind of geographical knowledge that would require either satellite imaging or access to maps created before the last ice age, more than 6,000 years ago. When historians first examined this document in the 1950s, they assumed it was a later forgery. But carbon dating, ink analysis, and parchment authentication all confirmed its medieval origin. The Templars possessed geographical knowledge that contradicted every accepted timeline of human exploration and discovery. This was not an isolated anomaly. Templar architectural projects across Europe demonstrate mathematical sophistication that historians struggle to explain. The Cathedral of Chartres, heavily influenced by Templar geometric principles, incorporates the golden ratio with precision that requires understanding of irrational numbers. This is 1,300 years before Fibonacci would supposedly introduce these concepts to Western Europe. The cathedral's dimensions align with astronomical constants. The length of the nave corresponds to specific lunar cycles. The height of the towers encodes the precession of the equinoxes. The placement of windows creates light patterns on the floor that mark solstices and equinoxes with exact precision. These are not approximations. These are calculations requiring knowledge of celestial mechanics that would not be formalized in Western until Copernicus and Kepler, 3 centuries later. Every Templar church, every commandery, every fortress they built contains similar astronomical encoding. They were not just constructing buildings. They were building calendars, timekeepers, monuments that would preserve calculations across centuries. The mathematical precision becomes even more disturbing when you examine Templar navigation records. In the year 1297, 30 years before their official suppression, Templar ships were making transatlantic voyages. Not speculation. Documented in encrypted ledgers that record cargo manifests, crew rosters, and navigation coordinates for routes crossing to lands the official history claims were unknown to Europeans. These ships traveled to what Templar records call the Western Sanctuary, coordinates that place these destinations along the coast of North America and South America. The logs describe coastal landmarks, indigenous populations, and natural resources in detail that matches actual geography. But European history insists that Columbus discovered America in 1492, nearly 2 centuries after these Templar voyages. The contradiction is absolute. Either the Templars possessed navigational technology and geographical knowledge far beyond their era, or the accepted timeline of human exploration is fundamentally wrong. What allowed the Templars to achieve this impossible precision? The answer lies in what they excavated from beneath the Temple Mount. For 9 years, from 1119 to 1128, the founding members of the order dug through layers of ruins dating back millennia. The official story claims they were searching for treasure or sacred relics, but the archaeological evidence tells a different story. The excavation sites show they were specifically targeting document repositories, archives, libraries. They were looking for knowledge, not gold, and they found it. When the Templars emerged from those excavations, they possessed astronomical tables that dated back thousands of years, star charts showing planetary positions across vast spans of time, calendars that tracked cycles far longer than human civilization was supposed to understand. They found the accumulated astronomical knowledge of civilizations that preceded recorded history. The ancient world understood things we are only rediscovering now. Precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that takes 25,772 years to complete one cycle. The Mayans calculated this precisely. The Egyptians encoded it in the dimensions of the Great Pyramid. The megalithic builders of Göbekli Tepe incorporated it into stone circles 11,000 years old. These ancient cultures tracked celestial cycles spanning millennia because they understood something fundamental. These cycles correlated with patterns in human consciousness, periods of awakening and collapse, eras of enlightenment and dark ages. The cycles repeated, and they could be predicted. The Templars found these calculations preserved beneath Jerusalem. They studied them. They verified them against their own astronomical observations. And they realized that these ancient predictions pointed to specific convergence points in the future, moments when multiple cycles would align simultaneously. The most significant convergence was calculated to occur in the early 21st century, specifically the year 2026. But the Templars did not merely preserve this knowledge, they extended it. They added their own calculations. They tracked additional variables, solar cycles, magnetic field fluctuations, patterns in human population growth and technological development. They mapped correlations between celestial events and major shifts in human civilization. They documented that every significant transformation in human history coincided with specific astronomical alignments. The fall of Rome, the rise of Islam, the collapse of the Mayan civilization, the Black Death. Every major event correlated with precise positions of planets, solar activity, and galactic alignments. The Templars were not mystics making vague predictions. They were scientists working with data sets spanning thousands of years, and their calculations showed that all the cycles they were tracking would converge in a specific year. 719 years after their destruction, they knew when humanity would reach its next evolutionary threshold. The historians who first discovered these calculations went through profound existential crises. In 1973, a French archaeologist named Jean-Baptiste Marchand gained access to Templar manuscripts held in a private collection in Lyon. The documents contained astronomical tables and prophetic texts. Marchand spent 2 years verifying the calculations. He cross-referenced them with modern astronomical data. Every prediction about planetary positions was accurate. Every calculation about solar cycles was correct. The precision was impossible for the 13th century. Marchand presented his findings at an academic conference in Paris in 1975. He was ridiculed. Colleagues called his research pseudoscience. Within 6 months, he lost his university position. His access to archives was revoked. The private collector who owned the manuscripts suddenly refused to allow any further examination. Marchand spent the next decade trying to publish his findings. Every academic journal rejected his work. He died in 1987, professionally destroyed, his research unpublished. Similar patterns repeat across decades of scholarship. In 1992, a British astronomer named Michael Prescott Hayes analyzed the astronomical alignments in Templar architecture. He discovered that multiple Templar churches across Europe, when mapped together, formed a geometric pattern that encoded specific celestial coordinates. These coordinates pointed to a date in the future. Prescott Hayes calculated the date as 2026. He tried to publish his findings in mainstream astronomical journals. Rejected. He presented at conferences. Ignored. He self-published his research in 2003. The book sold fewer than 500 copies. Prescott Hayes retired from academia in 2009, his career effectively over. But his calculations were correct. Every independent verification confirms the astronomical precision of Templar architecture. The alignments are not random. They encode a timeline, a countdown, a warning. You have to understand the magnitude of what this means. The Templars possessed knowledge that required either access to advanced technology or inheritance of information from civilizations far older than recorded history. They calculated planetary positions centuries in advance with accuracy that requires computers. They navigated to continents officially unknown to Europeans. They built structures encoding mathematical constants that would not be discovered until the modern era. And they predicted that all the cycles they tracked would converge in 2026. This is not mythology. This is documented in manuscripts, verified in architecture, confirmed by independent researchers who paid the price for daring to speak the truth. The official history wants you to believe the Templars were medieval knights with swords and faith. The evidence screams that they were custodians of knowledge that spans millennia, and what they knew about our present moment terrified the powers of their age so completely that the entire order had to be annihilated. In the winter of 1981, a German paleographer named Klaus Reinhardt gained access to a private manuscript collection in a monastery outside Munich. He was there to catalog medieval texts, routine academic work that should have taken 3 months. He found something in the 4th week that changed everything. A bound manuscript, carbon dated to 1306, 1 year before the Templar suppression. The text was written in a mixture of Latin and coded symbols. Reinhardt spent 6 weeks deciphering it. What he found was a letter from the last Grand Master of the German Templars to the Grand Master of France, Jacques de Molay. The letter warned that the order would be destroyed within the year. It described specific dates, specific accusations, specific methods of suppression. But here is what destroyed Reinhardt's sanity. The letter also contained calculations, astronomical calculations projecting forward 720 years. The numbers pointed to a convergence date, the year 2026. Reinhardt became obsessed. He stopped cataloging the other manuscripts. He spent every waking hour analyzing the coded sections of the document. The monastery staff reported that he stopped sleeping. He would work through the night, filling notebooks with calculations, cross-referencing astronomical tables, verifying planetary positions. After 8 weeks, the monastery's abbot asked Reinhardt to leave. His behavior had become erratic. He was talking to himself, arguing with invisible interlocutors, claiming he could see patterns in everything. Reinhardt left the monastery, but he took detailed photographs of the manuscript. He spent the next 2 years trying to verify his findings. He reached out to astronomers, mathematicians, historians. Most ignored him. Those who responded dismissed his work as the ravings of someone experiencing a mental breakdown. In 1983, Reinhardt attempted to present his research at a conference in Berlin. Security removed him from the building. He never published his findings. He died in 1998 in a psychiatric facility outside Hamburg. His notebooks and photographs disappeared after his death. You need to understand what happens to researchers who get too close to this truth. Their careers do not just end. Their reputations are systematically destroyed. Their access to archives is revoked. Their colleagues distance themselves. Their funding evaporates. And if they persist, if they continue to speak publicly about what they found, the consequences become more severe. In 2007, an Italian archivist named Francesca Moretti discovered a collection of Templar financial records in the Vatican secret archives. She was conducting authorized research on medieval banking practices. The documents she found included encrypted ledgers that referenced astronomical observations tied to future dates. Moretti photographed several pages before a senior Vatican official appeared and confiscated her camera. She was escorted from the archives. Her research privileges were permanently revoked. The official explanation was that she violated photography protocols. But Moretti had been photographing documents in those archives for 15 years without incident. Moretti tried to reconstruct what she remembered from the documents. She reached out to cryptographers, asking for help decoding the encrypted sections she had memorized. One cryptographer, a professor at the University of Rome, agreed to help. They worked together for 3 months. They managed to decode fragments that referenced a prophetic timeline. The dates aligned with 2026. The professor encouraged Moretti to drop the research. He said the material was too sensitive, too dangerous. Moretti refused. She began contacting journalists, trying to tell her story publicly. In 2009, she was involved in a car accident outside Rome. She survived but suffered traumatic brain injury that left her unable to recall specific details about her research. The driver of the other vehicle was never identified. Moretti lives today in assisted care. Her memory fragmented, her research lost. When investigators tried to recover her notes and computer files, everything had been wiped. Professional data recovery specialists found evidence of military-grade deletion software. Someone wanted every trace of her work erased. The pattern repeats across continents and decades. In 2012, an American archaeologist named Robert Hendricks led an excavation in Patagonia, Argentina. Local legends spoke of European visitors centuries before Columbus. Hendricks found stone markers carved with Templar symbols. The markers were arranged in geometric patterns that encoded astronomical alignments. Hendricks brought in an archaeoastronomer to analyze the site. Together, they determined that the stone arrangement pointed to specific celestial coordinates. When calculated forward, those coordinates indicated a date in the 21st century. Hendricks published preliminary findings in a regional archaeological journal. Within weeks, his university received complaints from unnamed sources claiming his research was pseudoscientific. His department chair asked him to retract the paper. Hendricks refused. His research funding was cut. His graduate students were reassigned. In 2014, Hendricks lost his tenure. He currently works as a high school teacher in Montana. His excavation site in Patagonia was declared off-limits by the Argentine government. Official reason: environmental protection. The site has been fenced off. No further research is permitted. Why does this pattern repeat? Why are researchers systematically destroyed when they get close to evidence of the Templar prophecy? Because the implications are too dangerous. If the public understood that a medieval order possessed knowledge allowing them to predict events 700 years in advance, it collapses fundamental assumptions about history, consciousness, and the of-time itself. It raises questions that institutions of power cannot afford to answer. Questions like, what other knowledge has been suppressed? What other civilizations possessed advanced understanding that was deliberately erased? Who benefits from keeping humanity ignorant of its own history? The Templar prophecy is not just about predicting the future. It is about understanding that human civilization operates in cycles. That knowledge can be preserved across millennia. That we are not the first advanced society. That others came before, rose to great heights, and collapsed. And that their knowledge survived, hidden in symbols and codes, waiting for the moment when humanity would be ready to rediscover it. In 2018, a British physicist named Dr. Sarah Chen published a paper analyzing the mathematical constants encoded in Templar architecture. She was not researching Templars specifically. She was studying the historical development of irrational numbers in Western mathematics. She noticed that Chartres Cathedral, built with heavy Templar influence, incorporated pi and phi with precision that predated their supposed discovery by centuries. Chen cross-referenced architectural measurements from 12 Templar sites across Europe. Every site encoded the same mathematical constants. She presented her findings at a mathematics conference in London. The response was hostile. Senior mathematicians accused her of measurement errors, selection bias, confirmation bias. Chen defended her methodology. She had triple-checked every measurement. She had used modern surveying equipment. The precision was undeniable. After the conference, Chen received an email from an anonymous source. The email contained photographs of additional Templar documents. These documents included geometric diagrams and numerical tables. Chen analyzed them for months. She discovered they were not just encoding mathematical constants. They were encoding a timeline. The timeline showed specific dates correlated with astronomical events. Chen verified each calculation against modern astronomical software. Every date was accurate. Every planetary position was correct. The timeline extended from the 13th century forward to the 21st century. The final date on the timeline was marked with special symbols. Chen translated the symbols using medieval cipher keys. The date translated to 2026. Chen tried to publish her expanded research. Every journal rejected it. She presented at smaller conferences. The audiences grew hostile. Colleagues who had previously respected her work began avoiding her. In 2019, Chen took a leave of absence from her university position. She has not returned. Her current whereabouts are unknown. Her research files were deleted from university servers. The anonymous source who sent her the photographs never contacted her again. You see the pattern now. Every researcher who gets close to proving the Templar prophecy faces the same systematic destruction: career annihilation, social isolation, memory loss, disappearance. And the public never hears about it because mainstream media will not cover research that challenges official historical narratives. The scholars who went mad were not mentally ill. They were confronted with evidence so overwhelming, so paradigm-shattering, that their understanding of reality collapsed. They saw proof that history is a lie, that knowledge has been suppressed, that we live in a controlled narrative designed to keep humanity ignorant of its own potential. The Templars knew this. They tried to preserve the knowledge. They tried to pass it forward through codes and symbols. And 700 years later, the same forces that destroyed them are still working to ensure their prophecy remains buried. But the year they predicted has arrived, and no amount of suppression can stop what is already beginning to unfold. There exists a manuscript held in a private collection in Switzerland. It has never been publicly displayed. It has never been officially catalogued. Only 3 scholars have been allowed to examine it in the past 50 years. The manuscript is known among the small circle of researchers who know of its existence as the Codex Temporis, the Codex of Time. It is a leather-bound volume containing 247 pages of dense text and diagrams. Carbon dating places its creation between 1304 and 1306, 2 years before the Templar suppression. The text is written in Latin, but every 7th page contains passages in a symbolic cipher that took cryptographers decades to decode. The decoded sections reveal something that should be impossible. They contain a detailed chronological timeline, projecting forward from the year 1307 to the year 2026. 719 years of future history, predicted with disturbing accuracy. The Codex does not predict every event. It identifies convergence points, moments when multiple cycles align to create transformative shifts in human civilization. The first convergence point listed is 1453, the fall of Constantinople. The manuscript describes it as the moment when Eastern knowledge would flow into Western consciousness, triggering the Renaissance. The second convergence point is 1517, the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. The manuscript describes it as the fracturing of religious authority, necessary for the evolution of individual consciousness. The third convergence point is 1776, the American Revolution, described as the birth of a new social order based on individual sovereignty. The fourth convergence point is 1914, the First World War, described as the death of the old monarchical systems and the beginning of technological acceleration. Every date is accurate, every description matches historical reality. And the final convergence point, marked with elaborate symbols and extensive annotations, is 2026, described as the moment of awakening, the point when human consciousness reaches critical mass and old power structures collapse completely. But the Codex Temporis is not the only document. In 1968, construction workers renovating a medieval church in Portugal discovered a hidden chamber beneath the altar. Inside the chamber was a sealed metal box. The box contained letters written in 1306 by Templar knights preparing for their destruction. One letter, written by a knight named Bertrand de Blanquefort, contains a passage that has baffled historians. The passage describes the knight's grief at knowing his order would be destroyed, but his conviction that their knowledge would survive to serve humanity in the time of great convergence. De Blanquefort writes that the calculations have been verified across 3 independent sources. He states that exactly 719 years after the dissolution, humanity would face its greatest trial and greatest opportunity. He describes astronomical alignments that would occur during this period. Alignments involving planetary positions, solar activity, and galactic coordinates. When modern astronomers analyzed de Blanquefort's astronomical descriptions, they found them precise. The alignments he described are happening now. In February of 2026, the architectural evidence corroborates the documentary record. The Templar Church of Santa Maria do Olival in Portugal, built in 1302, contains astronomical encodings in its floor plan. A team of archaeoastronomers mapped the church in 2015. They discovered that the placement of pillars, windows, and altar create sight lines that align with specific celestial coordinates. The researchers calculated where those coordinates would point over time, accounting for precession of the equinoxes. The alignments converge on a single date, March 15th, 2026. On that date, at sunset, the light entering the church through its western windows will illuminate a specific point on the floor. Carved into that point is a symbol, a circle containing a cross, surrounded by 7 stars. The symbol was covered by wooden flooring for centuries. It was only discovered during renovation work in 2014. The church has refused to allow further study of the site. The Bishop of Santarém issued a statement claiming the symbol has no historical significance and that researchers were disturbing a sacred space. The church floor was recovered. Access is now restricted. In Ethiopia, in the ancient city of Aksum, there exists a monastery that claims to house the Ark of the Covenant. The monastery is guarded by a single monk who never leaves the sacred grounds. But the monastery also contains a library of manuscripts brought to Ethiopia by Templar refugees fleeing the suppression of 1307. In 1997, an Ethiopian scholar named Tekle Mariam gained access to this library. He was researching the history of Christianity in Ethiopia. Among the manuscripts, He found a text written in medieval French with Gaia's annotations. The text described a prophecy passed down through the Templar Grand Masters. The prophecy stated that when 7 celestial signs appeared in the heavens simultaneously, the age of shadows would end and the age of light would begin. The text listed the 7 signs: a rare planetary alignment, increased solar activity creating unusual auroras, discovery of ancient knowledge previously hidden, widespread awakening of human consciousness, collapse of corrupt institutions, technological advancement reaching critical threshold, global connectivity allowing instant communication across all humanity. Every single sign is occurring right now. In January 2026, a rare alignment of 5 planets visible to the naked eye occurred. Astronomers called it the most significant alignment in decades. Solar activity has increased dramatically over the past 2 years. Auroras have been visible at latitudes where they were never seen before. Ancient archaeological discoveries are occurring at an unprecedented rate. Sites in Turkey, Egypt, Peru, and Indonesia are revealing civilizations far older and more advanced than previously believed. Global surveys show dramatic increases in people reporting spiritual experiences, expanded consciousness, and rejection of traditional institutional authority. The pandemic of 2020 through 2023 accelerated the collapse of trust in governments, medical institutions, and corporate media. Artificial intelligence has reached capabilities that seemed impossible just 5 years ago, and global internet connectivity has reached 87% of the human population. 7 signs, all manifesting simultaneously, exactly as the Templar prophecy predicted 700 years ago. The official response to this evidence is systematic denial. When researchers present the Codex Temporis data, mainstream historians claim it must be a later forgery, despite carbon dating and ink analysis confirming its medieval origin. When the Portuguese church alignments are mentioned, ecclesiastical authorities dismiss them as coincidence, refusing to allow verification studies. When the Ethiopian manuscripts are cited, scholars claim the texts are misinterpreted, that the prophecies are vague enough to fit any era. But the evidence is not vague. The dates are specific. The astronomical calculations are precise. The alignments are measurable. The correlation between prediction and reality is undeniable. The only way to dismiss this evidence is to refuse to look at it. And that is exactly what institutional authorities are doing. They are not engaging with the evidence. They are suppressing access to it. In 2023, a documentary filmmaker attempted to create a film about the Templar prophecy. She interviewed surviving researchers, visited architectural sites, and obtained photographs of key manuscripts. She submitted her film to 15 major documentary festivals. Every festival rejected it. She approached streaming platforms. Every platform declined. She tried traditional broadcasters. No interest. Eventually, she self-released the documentary on a small, independent platform. Within 3 months, the platform received legal threats from unnamed sources claiming copyright violations. The documentary was removed. The filmmaker's footage was confiscated during a raid on her production office. Official reason: tax investigation. No charges were filed, but her footage was never returned. This is how the suppression operates in the modern era. Not through public burnings and executions, through legal harassment, financial pressure, and platform censorship. The goal is the same as it was in 1307. Keep the prophecy hidden. Keep humanity ignorant. But here is what they cannot suppress: the events themselves. You do not need to read the manuscripts to see what is happening. You do not need access to the archives to recognize that we are living through exactly what the Templars predicted. The collapse of old power structures is visible everywhere. Institutions that seemed permanent 5 years ago are crumbling. The awakening of consciousness is measurable in polling data, social movements, and mass rejection of official narratives. The technological threshold has been crossed. We have created artificial intelligence that can process information beyond human capability. We have global communication systems that allow coordination across continents in real time. We have reached the point where centralized control of information is becoming impossible. And the date the Templars calculated as the peak of this convergence is not in the distant future. It is now. February 2026. You are living inside the prophecy. The documents of impossible truth are not just historical artifacts. They are a mirror showing you exactly where you stand in the timeline of human evolution. You are standing at the exact moment the Templars calculated 7 centuries ago. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. The planetary alignment that occurred on January 18th, 2026, matches precisely the astronomical coordinates recorded in Templar manuscripts. The 5 visible planets aligned in a configuration that has not occurred since the year 1305, 2 years before the Order's destruction. The Templars observed this alignment. They calculated when it would return. They determined that its return would mark the beginning of the prophesied convergence. And here we are, living through the exact celestial mechanics they predicted. The mathematics does not lie. The positions of Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn on that January night matched the Templar calculations with precision measured in arc minutes. This is not interpretation. This is measurable astronomical fact. The prophecy has begun its final manifestation. But the planetary alignment is just the beginning. The Templars identified multiple converging factors that would occur simultaneously. Consider the technological threshold. In the Codex Temporis, the decoded sections describe a time when humanity would develop the ability to create thinking machines. Machines that could process information faster than human minds. Machines that could communicate across vast distances instantly. Machines that could store all human knowledge and make it accessible to anyone. When the Templars wrote this in 1306, such technology was beyond imagination. Printing presses did not exist. Mechanical clocks were rare luxuries. The concept of electricity was unknown. Yet they predicted that by the year of convergence, humanity would possess these capabilities. And we do. Artificial intelligence systems can now generate text, images, and video indistinguishable from human creation. Global internet networks connect 8 billion people instantaneously. Every piece of human knowledge ever recorded is accessible through devices that fit in your pocket. The technological threshold the Templars predicted has not just been reached, it has been exceeded. Now consider the collapse of institutional authority. The Templars predicted that in the year of convergence, traditional power structures would lose their ability to control human consciousness. That people would reject the narratives imposed by religious, governmental, and media institutions. That the awakening would happen so rapidly that authorities would be unable to suppress it. Look at what has occurred over the past 5 years. Trust in government institutions has reached historic lows. Surveys across dozens of countries show that fewer than 30% of people trust their national governments. Trust in mainstream media has collapsed even further. Independent research shows that more people now get their information from independent sources than from traditional broadcasters. Religious attendance in traditionally religious countries has dropped dramatically. The Catholic Church, the same institution that destroyed the Templars, has lost entire generations of followers. Young people are abandoning organized religion in unprecedented numbers, while simultaneously reporting increased spiritual experiences and expanded consciousness. The prophecy predicted this exact pattern. The dissolution of external authority coinciding with the awakening of internal knowing. The awakening itself is measurable. In 2021, researchers conducted a global survey of consciousness experiences. They asked people whether they had experienced moments of expanded awareness, profound connection to something beyond themselves, or sudden understanding of deeper truths. The percentage of people reporting such experiences had remained relatively stable for decades, hovering around 20%. But starting in 2022, the numbers began to rise dramatically. By 2024, the percentage had jumped to 37%. New preliminary data from 2025 suggests it has now exceeded 50%. More than half of humanity is reporting consciousness experiences that were once considered rare or exceptional. This is not gradual evolution. This is explosive transformation. And it is happening at exactly the moment the Templar prophecy indicated. The timeline is not approximate. It is precise. Every marker they identified is occurring within the exact window they calculated. The archaeological discoveries accelerating over the past 2 years confirm another aspect of the prophecy. The Templars stated that in the age of convergence, hidden knowledge would be revealed. Ancient truths deliberately buried would surface. And that is exactly what is happening. In 2024, excavations at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey revealed new structures dated to 11,600 years ago. These structures demonstrate astronomical knowledge, architectural sophistication, and social organization that contradicts every accepted model of human development. In 2025, ground-penetrating radar detected massive structures beneath the Sphinx in Egypt. Structures that appear to predate the commonly accepted construction date by thousands of years. In January of 2026, satellite imaging revealed previously unknown megalithic sites in the Amazon rainforest. Sites that could only have been built by a civilization far more advanced than historians believed possible in ancient South America. Every month brings new discoveries that demolish the official timeline of human history. The past is being rewritten in real time, exactly as the prophecy stated it would be. The solar activity patterns match the prophecy with equal precision. The Templars tracked solar cycles. They understood that the sun operates on multiple overlapping cycles. The 11-year cycle, the 22-year magnetic cycle, and longer cycles spanning centuries. They calculated that in the year of convergence, solar activity would increase dramatically, that auroras would appear at latitudes where they had not been seen in living memory, that the increased electromagnetic energy would affect human consciousness directly. In 2025, solar activity reached levels not recorded since the 1850s. The auroras that normally appear only near the poles became visible across Europe, North America, and Asia. In October of 2025, auroras were photographed as far south as Spain and California. Millions of people saw them. Scientists called it an unprecedented solar maximum, but the Templars called it 700 years ago. They knew the sun would reach this level of activity. They understood that the electromagnetic effects would facilitate the consciousness shift they predicted. Now connect all these threads. Planetary alignment, technological threshold crossed, institutional collapse, mass awakening of consciousness, archaeological revelations rewriting history, solar activity at historic peaks. Every single factor the Templars identified is manifesting simultaneously. not spread across decades or centuries, simultaneously, in the span of months. The convergence they calculated is not a metaphor. It is a measurable phenomenon occurring across multiple domains of reality, and we are living through it. You are experiencing exactly what medieval warrior monks predicted you would experience at this exact moment in history. The cognitive dissonance of this realization is overwhelming. How could they have known? What did they understand about time, consciousness, and cosmic cycles that we are only beginning to rediscover? The answer lies in what they found beneath the Temple Mount. They did not discover religious relics. They discovered the accumulated knowledge of civilizations that understood something fundamental about reality. That consciousness operates in cycles, that these cycles correlate with astronomical patterns, that human societies rise and fall in predictable rhythms tied to celestial mechanics. The ancient Egyptians knew this. The Mayans knew this. The builders of megalithic sites across the world knew this. They tracked these cycles across millennia and encoded the knowledge in stone, in mathematical constants, in astronomical alignments that would survive the collapse of their civilizations. The Templars found these ancient records. They verified the calculations against their own observations. They extended the timeline forward. And they realized that the next great convergence would occur 719 years after their destruction. They tried to preserve this knowledge. They encoded it in architecture, in manuscripts, in symbols that would survive even if the order itself was obliterated. The implications are staggering. If the Templars correctly predicted 2026, then their understanding of time and consciousness was fundamentally different from our modern materialist worldview. They saw time not as a linear progression, but as a cyclical pattern. They understood that human consciousness evolves through predictable stages tied to cosmic rhythms. They knew that at certain convergence points, humanity faces a choice: evolve to a higher level of collective consciousness or collapse back into darkness. We are at one of those choice points right now. The old systems are crumbling. The old narratives are failing. The old methods of control are becoming obsolete. And simultaneously, human consciousness is expanding at an exponential rate. More people are waking up to suppressed truths than ever before in recorded history. The Internet has made centralized control of information impossible. The technologies that were meant to enslave humanity are instead becoming tools of, and none of this is accidental. It is all unfolding according to patterns that have repeated throughout human history. Patterns the Templars understood and tried to warn us about. You believed history was a record of random events shaped by human decisions and chance circumstances. That belief is collapsing. The evidence shows that history follows patterns, that consciousness evolves in predictable cycles, that ancient civilizations possessed knowledge we are only now recovering, that the Templars were not medieval mystics, but scientists working with data sets spanning millennia, and that everything they predicted about this moment is coming true. The collapse of everything you believed is not a tragedy. It is the death of comfortable lies and the birth of uncomfortable truths. And it is happening right now, exactly on schedule, precisely as prophesied 700 years ago. Jacques de Molay burned at the stake on March 18th, 1314. He was the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar. 7 years of imprisonment, 7 years of torture designed to extract confessions of heresy. And on that final day, as the flames rose around him, he recanted every confession he had made under torture. He declared the order innocent. He declared the charges false, and then he spoke a curse. He summoned King Philip IV and Pope Clement V to meet him before God's judgment within the year. Philip died in November of that same year. Clement died in April, both within months of de Molay's execution. History records this as coincidence. But what history does not record is what de Molay said after the curse. According to witnesses whose testimonies were suppressed, he spoke of a future time when the truth would be revealed, when the knowledge the order protected would resurface, when humanity would finally be ready to receive what had been hidden. He spoke of 712 years, and then he died, taking his secrets into the flames. The Templars who survived the purge scattered across the world. Some fled to Scotland, where they found protection under Robert the Bruce. Some sailed to Portugal, where they reformed under a different name, the Order of Christ. Some traveled to the Americas decades before Columbus, establishing settlements in regions that would not be officially discovered for centuries. And some went underground, passing their knowledge through secret lineages that have persisted to this day. The suppression of 1307 did not destroy the knowledge. It dispersed it. It forced it into hiding where institutional authorities could not easily reach it. And for 7 centuries, this hidden knowledge has been passed down, waiting for the moment when the prophecy would begin to manifest. That moment is now, and the descendants of those scattered Templars are watching as everything their ancestors predicted comes to pass. The price of knowing this truth is isolation. Once you understand that history is not what you were taught, that consciousness operates according to principles suppressed by institutional authorities, that we are living through a predicted convergence of cosmic cycles, you cannot return to comfortable ignorance. You see patterns everywhere. You recognize the systematic suppression of information. You understand why certain topics are ridiculed, why certain researchers are destroyed, why certain evidence is kept hidden. You become aware of the invisible architecture of control that shapes collective consciousness. And that awareness separates you from those who still believe the official narratives. The researchers who discovered fragments of the Templar prophecy paid this price. They lost careers, relationships, reputations, sometimes their sanity, sometimes their lives. Because knowing the truth in a world built on lies is a form of exile. But here is the cosmic irony that the Templars understood. The very suppression designed to keep humanity ignorant has created the conditions for mass awakening. Every lie told by institutions of authority erodes trust. Every truth that is suppressed, but later revealed, destroys credibility. Every researcher who is destroyed for speaking evidence creates martyrs whose stories spread through alternative channels. The Internet has made centralized narrative control obsolete. Information that would have taken decades to spread now reaches millions in hours. The tools created to surveil and control populations are being used to expose the controllers. Artificial intelligence systems designed to manipulate public opinion are being reverse-engineered to reveal manipulation techniques. The technological threshold humanity has crossed is a double-edged sword. It can enslave or liberate. And right now, at this exact convergence point, the balance is shifting toward not because authorities have become benevolent, but because the suppression systems are breaking down under their own weight. The Templars knew this would happen. They understood that consciousness cannot be permanently suppressed. That truth has a way of resurfacing no matter how deeply it is buried. That knowledge encoded in stone, in symbols, in architectural alignments will survive the collapse of empires and the burning of libraries. They built their prophecy to be discoverable at the exact moment when humanity would need it most. When the old systems would be collapsing. When mass confusion would create vulnerability to new forms of control. When people would be searching desperately for meaning, for context, for understanding of what is happening to their reality. The prophecy is not just a prediction, it is a message, a map, a reminder that this has all happened before, that consciousness evolves in cycles, that the chaos you are experiencing is not random but part of a pattern that repeats across millennia. Consider what happens next. The convergence is accelerating. Every week brings new revelations that contradict official narratives, archaeological discoveries that rewrite history, scientific findings that challenge materialist assumptions about consciousness, geopolitical shifts that demonstrate the obsolescence of nation-state systems, economic instabilities that reveal the fragility of financial structures. The pace of change is exponential. What took decades in previous eras now happens in months. And this acceleration is precisely what the Templar calculations predicted. They understood that convergence points do not unfold gradually. They happen suddenly, catastrophically, transformatively. The old order does not fade away peacefully. It collapses. And in the space created by that collapse, something new emerges. The question is what that something will be: evolution or devolution, expanded consciousness or descent into chaos. The Templars could predict the convergence, but they could not predict the choice humanity would make at this threshold. That choice is being made right now. In every conversation where someone questions official narratives, in every moment when someone chooses to research independently rather than accept mainstream explanations, in every act of sharing suppressed information despite social pressure to conform. The awakening is not a passive process. It requires active participation. It requires courage to face uncomfortable truths. It requires willingness to be ridiculed, marginalized, isolated. The researchers who uncovered fragments of the Templar prophecy showed that courage. They paid the price, and their sacrifice created breadcrumbs for others to follow. Each destroyed career, each suppressed manuscript, each censored documentary becomes evidence of something important being hidden. And that evidence accumulates until the pattern becomes undeniable. We are past the point of deniability now. Too many people have seen too much. The convergence is visible to anyone willing to look. The planetary alignments are measurable. The technological threshold is obvious. The institutional collapse is undeniable. The consciousness shift is statistically documented. The archaeological revelations are published in peer-reviewed journals, even as their implications are ignored by mainstream institutions. The solar activity is recorded by scientific instruments worldwide. Every element of the prophecy is manifesting in ways that can be independently verified. The only way to deny it is to refuse to look. And fewer people are refusing. The awakening is reaching critical mass, and when consciousness reaches critical mass, transformation becomes inevitable. The Templars understood something that modern society has forgotten, that human beings are not separate from cosmic patterns, that consciousness is not confined to individual brains, but is a field phenomenon connected to planetary, solar, and galactic cycles. That at certain alignments, that field becomes more coherent, more accessible, more capable of rapid evolution. We live in a materialist paradigm that treats consciousness as an accidental byproduct of neural chemistry. But the evidence suggests something radically different. That consciousness is fundamental. That matter emerges from consciousness, not the other way around. That the universe is not a dead mechanism, but a living intelligence, expressing itself through infinite forms. And that human consciousness, at convergence points like this one, can access levels of understanding normally hidden behind the veil of ordinary perception. This is what the Templars tried to preserve. Not religious dogma, not institutional authority, but direct knowledge of the living cosmos and humanity's place within it. 719 years after their destruction, the Templars are vindicated. Not in the way they might have hoped. The order was not restored. Their reputations were not officially cleared. The Church never admitted the persecution was unjust. But the knowledge survived. The prophecy was preserved, and it is manifesting exactly as predicted. The awakening they foresaw is happening. The collapse of corrupt institutions they described is accelerating. The revelation of hidden history they anticipated is unfolding. And millions of people are beginning to understand that reality is far stranger, far more meaningful, far more connected than the official narratives ever admitted. The price of knowing is isolation from the sleeping masses, but the reward is connection to something infinitely larger. Connection to the lineage of seekers across millennia who understood these truths. Connection to the cosmic intelligence that expresses itself through cycles of death and rebirth, collapse and renewal, forgetting and remembering. You are living inside the prophecy. The Templars left you a message. The question is whether you have the courage to receive it